LonelyLess. I have to slow down to say that and enunciate it correctly, Pastor Mike Novotny, LonelyLess. But it is so clever, and it sounds like a Pastor Mike Novotny title. How did we get to LonelyLess? Was it just to confuse me? It was, wasn't it?
That's when I sat down to write a book on loneliness. That was the number one question I had. Not how can I help people? How can I make this difficult for Dawn?
Thank you. You're so thoughtful.
You're welcome.
Really.
You're welcome. Got to keep you humble.
Yes. Loneliness, though. I was thinking about this as I read your book, and I was thinking generationally because I think back to my children. I have one that was not raised with a phone in her hand. I have one that she very much was of the generation where phones kind of came with the territory. And of course, as a parent, you try to steward all of that. And yet it's very real. And you had to work really extra hard to help the children of that generation learn to make eye contact, learn to speak. Why should I? I can text somebody. Like this generational gap is adding to our loneliness epidemic pandemic, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's true. Loneliness, which I define as not just being alone. I think Jesus took time to be alone all the time, but instead just that feeling like you want something more relationally. You want closer connections with your church family. You wish you were close to your biological family. You wish someone would text you or reach out to you to do coffee or to go out for dinner. So I think that feeling obviously has always existed in humanity. But Dawn, you're 1,000% right. I think there's all these kind of modern conveniences that are good things and they're not inherently sinful or unchristian things. But if we do those things too often, I think just bit by bit and day by day, it kind of adds up to what some have called the epidemic of loneliness that Americans are experiencing today.
You think that's how we got here? Or was it something else culturally that was going on, or some event that really kind of put us to where we are today? Or was it just that really slow, gradual fade into this?
Yeah. Human beings tend to take the path of least resistance. And I think without real intentionality, so let me give an example. Let's say I go to church on a Sunday. Number one, I have to fight the battle. Am I going to shower and put on pants and actually go to my church instead of just watching the live stream, which I could?
As a pastor, I hope the answer is yes.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry. Hypothetically.
The rest of us.
And I can't figure out why I'm so lonely. Everyone keeps Yeah. So, you fight that first battle to actually get to church. And then I like to watch when people come to church and there's spaces to sit, and will they sit next to other humans or will they kind of pick a spot by themselves? And then once they sit, if they're next to someone, will they do the hard work of like that awkward small talk, or will they put their heads down and pull out their phones? And, I think all those little things, which happen to us all the time, you can see if a person did that for a year, they would say, I don't really have great relationships at my church. All those things, there's no Bible passage that says, thou shalt sit right next to a person when you walk into church and you shall have a 4-minute. But, when we do that with grocery shopping, when we do that with zooming into work meetings, when we do that with shopping and Amazon deliveries instead of going to the store, when we do this with friends that will text or send a Snapchat instead of getting together, like all these things, I do really think it's a cultural moment where I'm saddened by how many people feel lonely, but I'm not surprised by it one single bit.
No, not surprised. We recognize it most of the time in our lives when we sense loneliness. And yet some, Pastor Mike, might have grown up so lonely that it's the water in which they swam and they don't even recognize the loneliness. They don't recognize that it's just part of their life DNA. Because they grew up with that. And so as they hear you talk about being LonelyLess, they'd be like, I've got 17 cats. I'm fine.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to push anyone into social relationships. I think, people, I kind of describe it like different cups. Some people have this jumbo, like 64-ounce cup of relationships that they need to drink each day. And other people have a little 4-ounce, I just need a little bit of people time and then I'm good. So I don't think it's a one size fits all approach. But I do say that it was the U.S. Surgeon General himself who said there's a epidemic of loneliness, that 1 out of 3 people are very aware that their relationships are lacking and they feel at least somewhat lonely every single day. So, yeah, there might be people for who they're kind of blissfully unaware of their like lack of relationships, but it seems like more and more people are feeling it. It's like, I'm sitting on the couch, I'm scrolling my phone for the 87,000th time, and I'm missing something.
You
And the
want
reason I
more.
wrote this book is I
Yeah.
want more. I wrote this book to help people fix that, and it's not always easy, but I do think it's possible.
Well, as you say, not always easy, but possible, which means that I'm going to have to do something.
Yeah.
If you just describe me, Mike, and probably at times you have, that means I've got to, number one, recognize it. Number two, do something about that. And you actually lay out a number of steps to help us be lonely less. And I'm really intrigued with step number one. You're
Yeah.
starting with God.
Yeah, absolutely. The coolest thing about God, and I love celebrating that this Christmas season, is that when you're a Christian, you have God with you all the time. He was called Emmanuel, God with us. And he's a God who said, I will be with you always to the very end of the age. So the really sweet thing for Christians, and obviously the hard part about being a Christian, is that you turn away from the short-term pleasure of sin. I think that's the hard step. But then, I think we forget this, that the 3 most amazing people who have ever existed for all eternity are literally in the room with you. A perfect father, the most amazing brother, Jesus, and the powerful counselor that we call the Holy Spirit. So, that's the biggest thing I want to open people's eyes to. Like, I hope I can give you like some steps to better church relationships or better friendships, but I just want to open your eyes to the 3 best people that you could possibly imagine are not like blocking your direct messages because of Jesus. They've like showed up in the room in this very moment and they're not going anywhere. So to me, that's like the foundational relational thing that Christianity offers. It's just such a beautiful thing for our lonely hearts.
I read something recently Paul David Tripp had written about it is a theological impossibility for a believer, a Christ follower, to be alone.
Oh man.
It just can't happen. And yet, Mike, if we've not spent time with him, if we don't know who he is, we don't know his character, we have not experienced that connection through the Holy Spirit, then
Yes.
we're gonna feel alone because we can't see him face to face. What's the battle plan there?
Yeah, I like at the end of Ephesians chapter 1, the Apostle Paul, he was talking about praying for the Christians in Ephesus. And he had this great prayer. He said, I pray that God would give his spirit to open the eyes of your heart that you would know him better. Like you already know him, you already believe in him, but like he is so good, he's so kind, he's so sufficient, he's so enough. Like, so that's a good prayer. Like if you're lonely and you think, okay, God, thanks for being with me, and you're kind of ho hum about it, I would just start, 30 days of prayer saying, God, help me to know you better this month. Like even if I don't meet that special someone, even if people are too busy to hang out with me, like just open my eyes to see, wow, how spiritually spoiled am I that the God of the universe showed up today in my house, in my office, walking my dog by my side. Like that is an insane thing to think about, that God is God with us.
Yeah, it's such a cool thing to think about that. Yet at the same time, many of us say, all right, I get that. And my relationship with God is okay. It's pretty good, actually. And I appreciate the intimacy of the relationship that I have with God. It's the relationship with people that I struggle. And so often it's the people closest to us that we may struggle with the most. I can just imagine a lot of husbands and wives being like, I'm good with God, maybe pretty good, maybe with some of my friends, but it's my spouse, it's my husband, it's my wife that I feel so distant from and can't seem to connect.
Yeah.
What do you say to the person who's like, wait, we're just missing there. We can't get relationship there.
Yeah. Yeah. Life would be easy if it wasn't for the people.
Right.
Especially the one I see in the mirror. Yeah. So you're touching on some of the other steps I walk through in the book. The more I've thought about it, as I think about marriage or I think about family or I think about friendships, there's one part of the book that is really, it's been the most personally helpful for me. and as a spouse and as a dad. And it's a little section that I call How to Talk. Here's where it came from. I was thinking, why on a Sunday, as people are coming in and I'm the pastor of a church, why are there some people that when they walk through the doors, my gut reaction on my heart is, sweet, I hope they walk in my direction. And can I say this on the program? Like, and then there's other people where, yeah, you know what I'm saying. I don't have to say
You're
it
gonna
out
be
loud.
honest. You're
I'll
gonna
get
be
it.
We
honest. I
got
get
you.
it. Yeah.
Loud and clear.
I was thinking, why is that? What is it about those interactions or those conversations that make me less than thrilled to have them? And I realized that there's a really simple recipe for a good conversation. And here's what it's going to sound so basic. You're going to say, why are we talking about this? But it's so powerful. The recipe for a good conversation, whether it's with your husband, your wife, your best friend, your neighbor, your pastor, is me, you, good, bad. That's it.
Hmm.
So here's what I notice. A great conversation, if I talk about me and I don't give you like the 14-year-old in the back seat, one word answer, good, fine, like, okay, I actually talk. But I don't turn this talk into a monologue where Steve, oh, Steven, did I tell you? Like, I
Yep.
have people like that, and you can only like endure it for so long until you get exhausted. So it has to be me and you. I have to talk and I have to listen. And then I've noticed the people that I love talking to, they talk about the good things. They don't just like dump problem after problem and difficulty after difficulty. Like, you can be compassionate, but eventually your compassion cup drains and you just,
Uh-huh.
like, I'm not a paid counselor. But then other people only talk about the good things and you feel like you can't get close to them because you can't relate to them. They're not transparent or honest about their sins or struggles. So what I've kind of seen in so many relationships is if I can try to not be a mute, not be a monologuer, not be a dumper, and not be a denier, but follow the recipe of me, you, good, bad. Man, I'm having a hard time thinking of a relationship that's not at least somewhat, if not very healthy. So that's what I love to tell people. If you're
Yeah.
struggling at home, if things just aren't clicking for you and you're wondering why, think about that. In your interactions, do you follow me, you, good, bad? Or are you missing one of those boxes that makes maybe people hard to get close to you and want to stay to be with you?
Steve said a few minutes ago that the things that you're spelling out in the book, though, are going to take some effort. And it might even be difficult if we have only learned the monologue, Pastor
Mhm.
Mike, if we've only learned the negative or we've only learned the positive, and we can't really talk or trust people with the things that are challenging.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the steps that we can use to practice?
Hmm.
Safe people, like all these things, it's important to be able to do this and start out on the right foot.
Yeah. Yeah. This is really personal for me, Dawn, because I'm a monologuer
Hmm.
and my youngest daughter she has a little bit of that mute in her. And I see that sometimes that I can be exhausting because I just have, did I tell you about this book I read and this podcast I have? And sometimes the moment comes when I see it on people's faces, like, oh, Mike, stop being yourself for just 1 second, And then I see my daughter, freshman in high school, and I want to give her a little bit of my words because I'm like, oh, sweetie, like, uh, talking is so important for people to get to know you. You're an amazing person, and I want them to see that. So, yeah, I think maybe just the self awareness is where I would start. Literally on my whiteboard at home, I just wrote this little matrix: me, you, good, bad, and I'm gonna talk to my family about it today. And if you could write that in your planner or in your phone, just to start thinking about it and processing. I have a hunch, that little seed of self awareness could grow into little course corrections that might make your relationships a bit healthier.
Love that. Mike Novotny with us. He's a pastor, he's an author, speaker. He's written the book LonelyLess, 6 Steps to a Less Lonely Life. He's also a lead teaching pastor, lead speaker on Time of Grace and timeofgrace.org to connect with him. And Mike, while we're looking for connection, many of us had connection thrust upon us when we were younger. A lot of us, we became friends because those were the only kids in the neighborhood. If you wanted to go out and play, you had to play with those kids.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we became friends with certain people at school or whatever because we were in proximity with them. Now in adulthood, life looks a little bit better. We also maybe are a little bit more aware of who we kind of get along with and who we don't, who we like and who we don't. We may be quick to make judgments. what I'm trying to say here is I think in adulthood, I can struggle to make friends,
Hmm.
good friends.
Yeah.
How would, for the person who's like, I'm really don't even know where to begin
Yeah.
to make good adult friends, in addition to you, me, good, bad.
Yeah.
Do you have any ideas, suggestions, ways we can go about that?
Yeah. For me, by God's grace, I don't think loneliness has been a huge struggle in my life. And when I stepped back and asked myself, writing this book, like, well, I've struggled with a lot of things. Oh my goodness. Why has this not been one of them? And I realized that I am such an organized, like, scheduling person that when I see something good, it goes in my calendar and I protect that time with my life. So,
Hmm.
my wife and I have a date night every Friday night. We don't have to like wait to see if it's going to happen. It's in the calendar, and that time is sacred and reserved. So, I think one thing is just even if it's once a month, like say you connect kind of with someone at work, like, hey, do you want to grab a breakfast the last Friday of the month? And if you build it into your schedule instead of waiting, because everyone's so busy, or at least we think we are, that if you're just waiting for a time when you're sitting around doing nothing, it, it's probably not going to happen. But if you can build it into your calendar, hey, every Monday night I'm going to my small group at my church, or every Friday morning I grab coffee with a friend. So I kind of stepped back and I realized every Wednesday morning I'm with my accountability partner. Every Friday night I'm dating my wife. Every Monday night, I have this small group from church of people I connect with. And every month, my closest friends get together for a meal that we call Supper Club. And every Sunday night, I do dinner with my parents and my wife's mother. So it's all scheduled. So I don't have to flip the calendar and say, I wonder who I should hang out with this month. It's already in there.
Hmm.
And so I know not everyone is a type A kind of nerdy, organized person like I am. So I would say start small. But if you put it in the calendar and then you practice the me, you, good, bad, I would really be shocked if it didn't turn into something really good.
And prayer, Pastor Mike, like if I'm more of an extrovert personally as well. So to connect with people is not really that tough of a thing. But I do have a lot of friends that are introverts, and
Hmm.
to put themselves out there to, I wasn't pointing any fingers, but did you bring it up? When you are quieter, when it seems more of a risk or something you don't even want to do
Hmm.
because you're introverted, to reach out to that coworker or that person that you met at church and say, how about coffee? Like it there's a risk there, there's a vulnerability that you're thinking maybe the risk, the potential for hurt is not worth the connection that I don't have. It
Hmm.
is. But when we're on this side of it, before we take that step to say, do you want to go have coffee once a month?
Yeah.
It seems pretty intimidating.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to deny that for a second. For me, the hard part is not talking. For other people, the hard part is just pushing down that anxiety and doing a simple invitation. Um, I would ask someone in that situation with all gentleness, like, what are your other options? Um, I think I would rather nudge you and pray for you to do something kind of out of your comfort zone temporarily than watch you spend the next 6 months or 6 years just wishing you had a better friend. So my wife and I, we often run together on Saturday mornings. And have I ever told you about our phrase "into the wind"?
I don't
No.
Like,
think so.
like let's say we get to the end of our driveway and there's a really strong wind blowing crossways. It's really tempting to turn so the wind is at our back because that would just be easier. But then when we get done running down the street or wherever we're going, we have to turn around and go back into it. And so Kim and I always say to each other, let's go into the wind first. Like, let's do the hard thing now because we're going to have to do the hard thing sometime. Let's just do it now. And then one day, a couple miles down the road, we'll turn around and then we'll have this wind at our back. So I would say that to someone who struggles. Like in our world, there's no, perfectly easy way to have great friendships and a great family. So pray deep, know that God is with you. If someone by chance doesn't accept your invitation, Jesus is still going to be there with his arms wide open. So pray for strength, do the hard thing, reach out, ask someone out to coffee, go into the wind so you can turn around someday really soon and the wind of a good friendship is blowing at your back.
Hmm. You know, with any relationship, good friendship between spouses or friends, neighbors, coworkers, as we cultivate and develop those relationships, at some point in time, somebody's going to do something kind of stupid. Somebody's going to hurt each other's feelings. Somebody's going to do something
Yeah.
where, you're going to have to clean up maybe a little bit of a mess.
Mm.
And I think it can be tempting to think, man, that person messed up. I'm going to write them off.
Mm.
But I know that you'd probably say, rethink that before you do act too quickly, act with too much haste.
Yeah. I literally have some notes in front of me, and I added the phrase, make every effort. I think of Paul's words in Ephesians 4, where he says, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit. He talks about being completely humble and gentle, being patient with bearing with one another in love. So, yep, you're not Jesus. Your spouse isn't Jesus. The person you're trying to be friends with isn't Jesus. They will sin. You will sin. So I'd say have good expectations. There's going to be hard moments in every friendship. But if you can fight for those moments and not just be like one strike and you're out, yeah, maybe Steve, if I would write this book over again, I think it deserves a whole chapter on forgiveness, because without forgiveness, all of your relationships will be temporary, because Jesus isn't here in the flesh as your kind of best friend. So yeah, you're right. You have to remember what you've been forgiven. You have to get back to that simple teaching of the Lord's Prayer: forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. And that way a good friendship and connection can endure and not just be a temporary fix for your heart.
Forgiveness and grace, extending grace to one another. I keep thinking about the ministry time for grace where you serve and how important that is, Pastor Mike. I, it seems, I hate to put an indictment, a blanket indictment over all of us. And yet at times I feel like the grace is just not there. We don't extend it to one another. We jump to conclusions. We think, oh, like you said, Steve, like you did it. That's once, you're
Yeah.
out. I can't give grace. Now I want grace. Please extend grace to me. However, I have a very difficult time extending grace to others. And if we find ourselves in that posture, we're going to have a really difficult time with connection and find ourselves lonely again.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to Ephesians 4, I'm not shocked that before he said make every effort, Paul said be completely humble.
Hmm.
So that, humble, okay, complete. He almost knows, like in a real church, in a real interpersonal relationship, oh my goodness, a little ounce of pride, thinking you're the bad sinner and I'm not that bad, and I'm going to keep my distance from you, but obviously God should forgive me. Like that kind of pride, it blows up fast. So yeah, I think we really need to lean into those moments and say, it's even more offensive to God when I sin against him. And yet through Jesus, he made every effort. He humbled himself and became obedient to a cross so that I could be a friend of God.
Hmm.
So yeah, in those moments, if you're struggling with like a real deep bitterness or hurt that makes it hard to forgive, I would just say before you look out at that person, like look up to God, think completely humbly about your own sinfulness and yet his acceptance for you. Take a deep breath. And now you're ready to look at that person and treat them with maybe a little more grace and mercy than you would have in the past.
That's good. Really good. A lot of us might be pretty good at making acquaintances. We may be pretty good at making real casual friends. We've got a lot of casual friendships, but deep friendships is what we're longing for.
Yeah.
For the person who said, yeah, I'm really good at the small talk thing and I know how to make new friends and I've got tons of people in my life, but what I don't recognize, or what I realize I don't have, are those deep, meaningful friendships that I long for. I don't know how to get there. I don't know how to get past the surface, Mike. How do I get deeper and past the
Yep.
surface?
Oh, I know the answer to this question. We have a small group Bible study that meets in my house every Monday night. And about a year ago, I picked my wife and I, and then 10 other people who I'm not sure that any of them had met ever, besides maybe two moms at like a mom's group at our church. And the first night of our group, I say, hey, here's the deal. We're here to do this crazy Christian experiment to actually love each other, to pray for each other, to help each other. So whatever's going on in your life, good or bad, like we want to know the real you, love the real you, support the real you, pray for the real you, correct the real you, forgive the real you. So whatever it is, if it's A, B, C, if it's addiction, if you're thinking about getting a divorce, if it's pornography, you say it and we'll help you with it. And Steve, when people were shocked at what would come out of their own mouths, they would, one guy said, driving over here, I thought, there's no way I'm going to talk about that. And then like somehow like the Holy Spirit like pushed it out of his mouth. And I tell you, a year later, those people are so shockingly close. They're unbelievably tight. They would tell each other anything. They babysit each other's kids. They hang out for dinner. And it didn't happen because they were like lifelong friends. I think honest confessions, and that's why I like the me, you, good, bad part.
Yeah.
When we're really honest about the bad with a capital B, it is like a super power glue. If I can be real with you and you can be real with me as brothers in the faith, like I've just seen it 100 times over, that strangers don't just become acquaintances, they become really close, like Christian friends really, really fast.
That depth, because we all relate to one another
Yes.
in our imperfection. We all relate to one another in the need for grace and forgiveness. And then we think that our sin will keep us from that. And I know you talk about shame and how shame can keep us in loneliness because we think our stuff is too bad and nobody can understand or forgive us. And God certainly can't. What are we going to do with shame?
Yeah. I love in those moments in our group or anywhere when someone has the courage to go into the wind and say what's really happening. I just love looking them in the eye and saying, you know, God loves you, right?
Hmm.
And that's when I have to go mute and just let that question mark sit in the room. Like, do you really believe that? I mean, not token loves you. Like that's what Christmas and that's what Easter and that's what the cross is all about, that God would take your shame and love you despite the things that you've done. And I've just seen that, like when we can, it's really terrifying to be transparent and vulnerable. But if we can respond, not just, I think it's good to say, hey, thanks for saying that. That took a lot of courage. But it's so much better to say, thanks for sharing that, because now I get to tell you the best news in the world, and it's the gospel of Jesus Christ. So to me, that's the simple recipe: honesty about sin and the forgiveness that we find in Jesus. Like as Christians, we have the best opportunity to be the most amazing friends because we can be totally honest because we know there's forgiveness at the end of the day, and we can give each other what we truly need. So, man, some days I like Jesus.
Preach.
This
Preach.
is one of those days. All right, I'll be quiet now, so it's not just me talking too much.
No, it is so good because I think that is what so many of us long for. We want that depth. We want that intimacy. We want to know other people and to be known by other people, but we're scared to do it.
Yeah.
We're scared to go first. We're scared to let people see behind the mask. And I appreciate the challenge that you've given us to do exactly that. Mike, as you have been putting these things into practice, as you've watched people put these things into practice, how have you seen relationships change in your own life and those close to you that you've watched do this?
Oh man, it's so sweet. Yeah, man caught me after church 2 days ago at our last service. And I could see him out of the corner of my eye just waiting. And I think he set the record for longest hug ever given in a church lobby. He just like, he locked on. And normally a good hug can go, what, 2-3 seconds? But
Yep.
I unlocked my hands after 3 seconds, but he wasn't unlocking his. And I remember him saying, he was super emotional because we had helped him out in a time of need. And he just said, my whole life, I thought I was unworthy of every form of love. But he came and he's a super honest guy. And his honesty led to like taking a step to help him and, serve him as a church family in a really practical way. And, oh man, I've seen stuff like that so frequently. If you can go into the wind and have the courage to talk about the good and the bad, it gives fellow Christians and church families a chance to respond with grace and generosity, which tightens the relationship, which makes you want to be even more honest the next time. And it's just this beautiful cycle that escapes secrecy and shame and loneliness. But that first step, like you said, man, I'm just praying for everyone listening that God would give you the courage to just say it. Tell the world about it on Instagram, but just like tell someone who loves Jesus and watch what happens. Because I have a hunch you'll be about 20% less lonely in record time.
it would be super fun, Pastor Mike, if somebody took your book, LonelyLess, and then put into practice all of the things. And they're simple, practical things. I mean, you didn't put anything that was, study an unabridged version of some big theological book. I mean, you just put practical steps in here that we can all do, and then keep track of what God does. Like, just journal
Yeah.
what the Lord does as you listen, as you learn me, you, good, bad, as you learn maybe a whole different way to communicate with somebody else so that those connections are strong and deeper. It would be super cool to hear them come back to you in Time for Grace and just let you know how lonely less they are doing.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that idea.
Yeah. Well, Mike, we so appreciate you, your friendship, the chance to connect here. And if you want to find out more about LonelyLess, these 6 steps to a less lonely life, I encourage you to connect with Pastor Mike. Timeofgrace.org is the website to go. It is timeofgrace.org, and hope that you'll check that out. Thanks for joining us here on Don and Steve Plus. Mike, thanks for being our plus one today, and hope that you'll check us out next podcast.